Okay, my adhesive is all applied now, and removing just a little bit of adhesive at a time and starting at the end with the small petals. This end has the much larger petals, as you can see. We are going to place our center in the middle of the rolled flower, and we're just going to start rolling petals around. Now, as I said, as I work, I'm going to be watching carefully for the petals, making sure that they're offset. And as I mentioned, there's two different techniques that you can do if the petals start to end up. Now, I see right here, you can see that you have a gap in the petals. I have to come closer apparently for you to see that. Let's see. Okay. So you can see there's a gap in the petals right here, and the next gap in the petal is going to line up perfectly, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to smush these ruffles together and put more paper around the flower, if that makes any sense. I hope that does. So I'm actually going to jam more paper around the flower before we get to that spot. So that when we do get to that spot, now look, now we have a full-size petal going to wrap around into that gap. Does that make sense? See, now we have a full-size petal going around that gap. It looks much, much prettier in the end, trust me. So we can do it that way. And the other way we can do it is actually separate the paper and leave a gap. So again, we now have a gap between two petals right here, and we have a full-size petal about to wrap around in that spot. It looks much, much, much prettier that way. Roll fairly tightly. Again, now we have a gap and we have a full-size petal. You always want to try and offset those. And a gap in the petal right there, and a full-size petal coming up to match it. And that has continued the next two, so that's great. And the next three, yay! And now we've got the same problem. So we're actually, in this case, going to stretch it and pull it around so that we avoid that problem in this case. If I'd had to, though, I would have ripped the paper and separated it in order to avoid that. Now when I get to about here, I'm going to check the flower and make sure I like how it's shaping up, because I may or may not use this last petal. I'm going to have to decide based on how I think it's looking. Now this is going to peel back quite a bit, so I can start doing that now. And you can do that if you like. You can leave it till later if you want to, but I'm not sure if I want to use that last petal or not. You could also have, I've got a little tear there. It sometimes happens. It's not a big deal. If I wasn't doing it on camera, I would have been more careful, of course, so you can be more careful too. Things happen on camera. What happens on camera stays on camera, right? You can spread this out, see how it's looking. You want to make sure you open it well so that your little stamens can show and stick out. They'll look nicer that way if they can sort of stick up. And let's see. Okay, so I added that final petal to my flower, and I've got it adhered in place. And as you can see, it turned out nice and round and pretty, and so I'm going to set that aside and we're going to work on the next part of the daffodil. So the final part, you're going to need a template for it, and I'm going to have that on my blog, Eclectic Endeavors. Don't worry, I will have it up on the screen how to spell that. You're going to download this template and you're going to cut it out. Now once you cut it out, you will need to snip a little further in than the template from what you actually traced. You actually snip a little further in. So what I like to do is I actually put my scissors into the groove and then point my scissors to about halfway between this point and this point. And then make a little snip. And then do the same here. And do the same here. You want to make sure you don't even come close to going all the way through. But by snipping the petals in further, it allows them to cup more. Like this one that I've got here, you can see how it's all curved. And it won't cup as nicely if you don't snip into the flower a little further. Now the way we're going to cup it is we're going to go back to the tool that we used before. It's multi-purpose. And we're actually going to press it down using an embossing mat. This actually feels sort of like foam under vinyl. I don't actually know what it's made out of, but it's different than the type of foam that you would use, say, for paper piercing. It's definitely different than that. It definitely allows your tool to glide more, even with the paper in between, than that does. Again, I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. Hey, maybe this groove is for putting your finger in. Learning something new as I go. So you're going to press that in. And don't worry about the little tiny, I don't know if you can see. Let me see if I can show it to you. Do you see there's a tiny itty bitty little crease right there? Can you see that as I rotate it in the light there? You can just barely see that. Don't worry about that, because actually Ruffled Daffodils actually have a tiny little ruffle around the outside of their white petals too. So it's actually perfect that this ruffles as we go slightly around the edges. So you're actually going to press down all around the petals until they cup quite nicely. And you're going to do so in the middle of the flower as well. And having this nice big round piece is very good for large flowers. This measures about a little over 2 inches across, the widest point. So it's a fairly decent sized flower. And then once you get that done, you can cup it with your fingers a little bit more. It is quite large, so you want to make sure you've got all the areas done. I missed a little bit over here. And then you want to repeat for the other 2 petals. So I'm going to do those and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have my piece all cupped very nicely now. You can see it actually has a quite nice dish sort of shape. It doesn't need to be quite as cupped as some flowers, because the daffodil petals, the white ones, are fairly open and the middles are what's really cupped. But one other detail that I noticed when I Googled the flowers, and I'm really hoping you can see this, I think you just can catch a glimpse of it right there in that light. Do you see the lines that I've embossed up the middles of those petals? I noticed that in the Ruffled Daffodils I saw it actually had sort of a groove up the middles of the petals, and I thought, well, that's not very hard to replicate. I can use an embossing tool for that. So the one that comes in the toolkit is this really nifty embosser. It has this nice squishy thing on it, and it has interchangeable tips. So it's very simple. You just unscrew this and you can change out the tips. Now this is the middle. There's 5, so this is the middle one. This is actually what I'm going to be using to, now I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it as I work, but I'm going to be using this one to make a couple of lines up the middles of these petals. Now it's 2 lines, and I noticed in some places it kind of looked like there was a hint of a third, so you can get artistic with it. You can Google these flowers and do your best to imitate what they look like in real life, because we are trying to imitate nature here. I do like to give them a slight curve to one side or the other, both of the 2 lines running roughly parallel, but then coming to a point, if you can get it to work out that smoothly. I know not everybody's used to working with an embossing tool, so you may not be able to get it to work out that perfectly, but if you can get the lines to run close to parallel but then come to a point right in this little divot here in the petal, then that would be perfect. But whatever you can get it to work like, I'm sure will still be beautiful. So I start in the middle and work out, and I give it a slight curve and then go out to the divot. You don't have to work quickly, so don't rush. and then another one beside it, and running roughly parallel and then coming to a point. That one actually worked out perfectly. They don't always for me, but that one was great. And you don't have to have the same curve on each one. And again, we're going to work out to the tip, and then another one parallel. There we go. And I'm going to do this one the other way, curved, out to the tip, and another one running parallel, and then coming to a point. So there we go. Okay, now a daffodil has 6 petals, so we're actually going to put these 2 together. This is the one I prepared earlier. You're going to layer them with your choice of adhesive. Sorry about that, I had forgotten to get out the adhesive I was going to use. I'm going to use a bit of Glossy Accents because it dries quick and it holds fast. You only need a couple of drops, and if you smear it around so that it's quite thin, it will dry quite quickly. So you're going to nest those 2 together, try and get it nice and evenly spaced. Let's see here. I think that looks about right. Sometimes if you look from the bottom, it helps to get it even too. Okay, I'm just going to hold that for a second. It would be so much fun to make a basket or something with a whole bunch of these decorating the edge of it. Probably some people would do that for a spring basket, or a wreath even would be really pretty. So that's probably pretty close. And then the last step is going to be to add your ruffled center. See, not so hard. This will take a little longer to dry because there's always some ridges and grooves under a rolled flower of this type. But you'll get the idea. So there you go. Okay, all glued up. Here's our finished flower, the Ruffled Daffodil. Hope you enjoyed it very much. Please see the list at the end of the video for all the supplies and tools. I've got the website for Joan's Gardens. Please buy the supplies from her. She's an absolutely lovely lady. She runs a blog where she lists all of her supplies, and all you have to do is phone or email her to get all these wonderful things. Almost everything she sells, or maybe everything she sells, is lower than manufacturer suggested retail. So it's a great deal as well. And she's definitely worth supporting. So I hope you liked the video, and I'd hope you'd love to make some of these ruffled daffodils. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.